So I think it's wonderful to follow the previous presentation, which was great and very inspirational. The challenge is you have to assess, if you're approaching it, I think, from a mission-driven organization, a religious institution, both the sort of the need and the market. And what would be nice was if the need and the market were the same thing, right? And if you're a for-profit housing developer trying to make a buck, or if you're starting a business, that is how you're thinking about it, right? So you're assessing, is there a need for this product that I want to put out there? And how do I investigate, this need and market? The challenge that you have if you're doing these kinds of deals is you see the need every day, but that doesn't mean there's an effective market where some end user will pay, a sufficient price to support either a rent or a mortgage that will enable you to pay for the real estate and the development. Having said that, you have to really think about both things. It's not enough to jump to, is there a market? I won't spend too much time on how you assess need. I think you heard a great presentation about how to think about that. Obviously, there's a range of ways of doing that. You can do kind of community planning workshops. I know a lot of faith-based institutions use this faith-based community organizing model where they do one-on-one meetings, or have a committee of people that do one-on-one meetings for folks throughout their congregation. So I'm going to sort of assume that folks have learned and have thought a little bit about how do we assess what folks in our parish, what folks in our neighborhood want and need. So you've got that sort of from some kind of planning perspective. There's all kinds of ways of doing this, and we're happy to talk with you about helping arrange workshops, helping design surveys, helping design a set of questions for your constituency. And I think whether you want to do that more or less formally really depends on sort of where you're starting. Because you can do that in small group conversations, you can do that a bit more formally. Then you start needing, though, to demonstrate that a little bit, and really you're demonstrating two different things. Again, that there's need in our community for this. So childcare is a fairly straightforward example. It's pretty easy to demonstrate in most parts of Brooklyn if you look at what affordable childcare slots there are and how many kids there are, that there's a very large mismatch. So you're using some secondary data. We often find, if you have the time, that it's great to go ahead and if you've got a particular constituency, go ahead and do a sort of simple survey. So it's not only the census data says there's X many kids, but we see that there's only Y many subsidized childcare slots. But we surveyed 100 of our parishioners, or 300 people in the neighborhood, and this was the percent that said they couldn't find a childcare space that they could afford. Just really sort of strengthens the case. And in a lot of cases, it doesn't take that much time. So I'm not going to go into all the demographic data you can look at because it depends. Is it a housing deal? Is it a childcare deal? Is it a commercial deal or a business? But there's a wealth of data out there. There's another thing we're happy to help talk to you about that can help you make the case. So you sort of have these three categories of informal conversation and learning or community planning work, a survey if you can do one, and then the sort of big data sets that are out there. Now, for housing deals or commercial deals, there's a pretty standard process, a standard set of data that folks want, either whether those are government institutions that you're going to go to for the subsidy, whether those are lenders, and you can kind of get some samples, and sort of folks know what's needed to show, here's what the market rate price is in the neighborhood, here's what folks can afford, and kind of what the incomes are, here's what we want to do, and you start to move toward your numbers, your pro forma, in a fairly set way. That's not to say it's easy or that it's not going to take a lot of time, but at least the lenders know, the investors know, the developers know what those performances look like, what numbers you need to show, how it relates to what price you're going to charge, what incomes folk have, what the costs of developing and building the thing are. And you can start to, this is kind of what we call the sort of back of the envelope phase. You're not getting to the full financing phase, we'll talk about it in a minute, but you're starting to figure out what could we do here? Are we in the ballpark to make this affordable housing deal work for what the incomes we want to be able to, the rents we are, or the sales prices we want to be able to do it at, and the cost of the land and the development. On the community facility side, unfortunately, there's really almost no fixed process. Unlike a business deal where banks are looking for a business plan, or a housing deal where there's sort of standard set of pro formas, there are not good systems for producing child care, senior centers, community centers, youth centers, any of those things. And so they're exceedingly important. The city's growing, your neighborhoods are growing, we need to do this stuff. Maybe we can work together on public policy that would help create some systems and pipelines, but for now, you're in a realm where you're going to be blazing the trail yourself. Doesn't seem like you should be, because yes, many child care centers have already been built. Nonetheless, you're going to be blazing a trail. And so you put that data together that shows there's need, and then you still have to put a business plan together. I mean, you do have to say, here's what we want to do. We want to build we think there's need for, 100, we want to do 100 slot child care. We're going to do it with a mix of incomes. We want some of that to be subsidized for very low income people, but we don't really want it to be totally low income, so we're going to try to have some kids who are paying. And you just start to pencil it out. Here's what we know those kids can pay. Here's what we know it's going to cost to operate. And that starts to help you work back to how big the gap is going to be and just how much money you're going to have to raise from public and private sources to make a project like that happen. We can come back and talk a little more about where you find those things. And I wish I had better news on where things like child care and senior centers and community facilities you went. But if you're at least starting from good knowledge of what's the need, what the basic costs are, what people are going to be able to afford to pay, and what it's going to cost you to operate and build out, you start to have a sense of, are you in the ballpark? Do we have something that we might be able to locate either on a site we already own or talk to a realtor about a site we want to acquire? And how big, I think if you start to do that, you realize that you're not going to be able to support any debt. I'll stick with child for just one more minute. You run the numbers and you find that, for what you want to do, you can support, you could borrow, that's going to pay enough that for your space costs, you're going to throw up enough money that you could borrow, $1 million. So after you pay for teachers and your other things, what's left over to service a mortgage or to make lease payments is going to, let's assume it's to service a mortgage. You'd be able to borrow, $1 million. But as you start to pencil out what it would cost to build out that thing, it's going to be $5 million. Well, that starts to help you. Now, maybe you've got connections in philanthropy and politics and individual donors that can help you figure out how you're going to get to that $4 million number. But that's where you're going to start figuring out how we're going to do